Hello again, YouTubers. Welcome back to the Board Game Captain. I'm the Board Game Captain.
And I'm Lynn.
And today we're going to be doing a bit of a retro RPG review for 2nd edition Nobilis. Now, this game has been out of print for over a decade. But we sometimes like to review older games, and this is the first time we've decided to go and review an older RPG, one that's been in our collection for quite some time. Now, Nobilis was designed at that time by Arshawn Borgstrom. She has since changed her name and is now going by Jenna K. Moran, and she still designs role-playing games in the industry. So if you had trouble finding more recent things by Arshawn Borgstrom, that's why. So now this was a game that I'm pretty sure this was the very first role-playing game that you ever picked out.
Probably.
So, because we were, back in the day, we were in a game store, and you came running up to me in the game store. This is like 1999, 2000, somewhere around there. When was this released? Because I think it was new at the time. Let's see if we can find the copyright here. But
you keep talking, I'll find it.
You came running up to me, and you said, hey, I want to play this game, let's buy it.
Copyright is 2002.
Okay, so it was probably 2002 then. So it's quite some time ago now. So I said, really? I said, what's the deal here? Because at the time you weren't very big into role-playing games. You became much bigger into role-playing games later. I think mainly because of this game. But before this, you had played some role-playing games that were kind of meh on them. You were better into like board games. And at the time, you were really big into some card games, like you used to be big into Magic, but you were never really big on on role-playing games. Mm-hmm. But you said you really liked the theme of this, and I started looking at it, and the whole thing was, well, first off, the book was absolutely beautiful. It had a cloth bookmark and this wonderful, gorgeous cover, and then the theme was about all the players got to be gods in the polytheistic sort of gods, the kind you would see in Roman, Norse, or Egyptian pantheons, that sort of thing. You'd be the god of a specific aspect of reality, like the god of love, or the god of hate, or the god of fire, or the god of doorways, or the god of toys, or whatever you want it to be. And it was very creative, and at the time, I think this was the most creative I had ever seen someone get with character creation, how you could really pick and choose what you wanted your abilities to be about because you got to pick what you were the god of. And they had a great blurb on the back from, it was a quote from someone else in the industry who said, imagine Neil Gaiman's Sandman and Clive Barker's Hellraiser on an absinthe bender with flowers. And that's Nobilis. And that was a quote from Kenneth Haidt. And I think that's summed up the game pretty well. Mm-hmm. Because it really did have that feel of you're playing in a universe created by Neil Gaiman and Clive Barker, which was pretty awesome. And so now the artwork in this 2nd edition is just also absolutely gorgeous. It's black and white, but they got some really amazing looking artwork for the game, and the rules are incredibly elegant. So now, what should we talk about first? Should we talk about the...
Well, my favorite thing about it, and the thing that originally drew me to it, was that because you're gods, you don't start out basically wimpy. And that was always my problem with the other traditional RPGs. You start out and like all your stats are lame, and you don't really get to do anything exciting. But you're a god. Your stats start out awesome and only get awesomer.
That is true. And one of the things that was really interesting for me, in addition to how creative you got to be when creating your god, your character, about this, was the elegance of this system. It was 100% meant to never have a break in the action from the role playing. It just flows. There's not even any dice rolls. This was a diceless system, and this was the first diceless role playing game system I ever played. Was it your first one too?
Yeah. I think the only thing I had played previously was maybe like a game of werewolf and/or vampire. I don't even know that. I'm
trying to think. I think you might have played some others, but you weren't a fan of role playing games before this game. This was the game that made you a fan of role playing games.
It was also the thing. It was. They say in here like if you have the ability to do it, like, you should be able to do it, and you shouldn't have to roll dice and
Because you're a
fail
god.
at something that you have the potential to do.
Well, but that's because you're a god. That wouldn't work for a regular mortal, because for a regular mortal, you should have a potential to fail because you don't hit the bullseye on the dartboard every
Right,
time.
but I mean, I'm just saying, in regards to the White Wolf stuff, you're not a regular mortal. You're a vampire, a werewolf,
Yeah, but there's still
some
not
other magical creature
It's
that
true.
shouldn't have that big of an ability to fail.
Yeah, but there's still not a god. I mean,
Yes.
again, that system I think is very very good with this. Now, the way the system works, let's talk about that a little bit because we're discussing it. So you have statistics, and the statistics are they're very simple. You've got a character sheet in the back here, so I'm going to show that to you. And the statistics are aspect, domain, realm, and spirit. And when you make your character, and when you're leveling up your character, though this is a levelless system, when you're just, I should better say than leveling up, when you're gaining experience with your character and upping your stats go from 0 to 5 in each of these areas. And each of these areas are fairly broad in their use, and the way they work is, so aspect is your physical and mental ability. It is your physical manifestation as a god. So anything you want to do, either physically or mentally, is done with the aspect stat. Domain is what you're the god of. So if you're the god of doorways, it's your control over doorways. Realm is your control of a little pocket dimension known as the chancel that you and the other gods in the player group have created together as a safe refuge. While in the chancel, realm acts as domain for everything. Because even though you might be the god of doorways, in your chancel, you're the god of the chancel. So you have power over everything there in that level. And then spirit gives you a defensive ability, this sort of anti-enemy godly power force field called an auctoritas. And it also gives you power with these flower rites, which are a little more specific and esoteric things that gods can do, and that's all controlled by the spirit. Now, basically, whatever you want to do, there's a fairly good outline in here on how difficult it should be. And if how difficult it should be, if you have that level and that stat, well, you can just do it for free. But if you need more than the level you have in that stat, you have temporary miracle points, which you can burn to temporarily boost your stat to be able to do it. Mm-hmm. And then, in addition, if you're trying to get through an enemy god's auctoritas, every point they have in spirit will also increase the difficulty to do it. And then, if you're doing something, you just say you're doing it. The game master tells you, which in this they call the game master the hollyhock god. It's the game master. But the game master tells you how difficult it should be. They say, oh, it should be a 4 difficulty. How much do you have in that stat? You say, oh, I have 4 in that stat. They say, okay, you can do it. And the only time you have a chance to fail is if you're directly opposing another god or some other being with a god-type power. And in that case, you and the other player, or you and the game master, each quickly note, either with writing it down on a little piece of paper, usually is how we used to do it. You quickly note how much power you're putting into it. And then you both reveal it at the same time. And whoever put more power into it succeeds and the other person fails when they're directly opposed. And that's basically the whole system. Would you like to talk a little bit, though, about the interestingness and the fact that in this game, in addition to making your character and how creative it can be, because you can be the god of anything, mm-hmm. You also, as a group, get to make your Imperator and your Chancel.
Oh, yeah. The Imperator, I forgot about him.
Yeah, he was. We haven't played it in a while. Him or her.
Yeah, that's the dude who basically created you, right?
Yes, he's the higher level god.
Yeah, so even though you're a god, most started out as humans. Although
all of them did. Well, no, there were options to have started as an animal.
Yeah.
But they all started mortal.
You all start mortal, and this dude called an Imperator turns you into a god. And it's basically, he is all of the people that he has turned into gods. He controls those aspects.
So he gives you a piece of his power because your Imperator will be the god of everything that all the player characters in the group are the gods of. So if your player group is the gods of doorways, toys, cats, and love, then your Imperator is the god of doorways, toys, cats, and love, and he makes you, the mortal, a Nobilis, a lesser god, by giving you a piece of his soul.
Yeah. And he was never mortal, so they're always usually weird and don't quite understand how humans work.
Yeah. Yes.
And you know, hilarity ensues at that.
There are some brilliant notes in here for the Game Master on how to control them because of that.
Yeah.
Which is absolutely, I think is fantastic.
And then with your chancel, it's basically your own little pocket dimension, like he said earlier.
Yeah.
And usually the person with the most realm, I think,
gets the most control.
Has the most control.
Yeah. But everyone gets a little control, and while the Imperator, I mean, they give you basic stats of what your Imperator should be. You get to alter them somewhat and decide where they go. You pick what type of Imperator, because there are lots of different types of Imperators. There's angels and fallen angels. There's Aaron's serpents. There's like true gods.
There's the wild.
There's all these different kinds. You get to pick what kind they are, which is very interesting. But then with the chancel, it's much more rules based. I mean, it's not quite as freeform because you get resources based on the combined realm stats of everyone in the group to spend on the chancel, which was really cool. And then you could. And
I mean, there were times when we had entire adventures just never leaving our chancel.
Oh yeah. Well,
that's also
the game recommends you should do 1 out of 3 adventures in the chancel.
Yeah. So it kind of switches it up where you're not always just like traipsing around wherever you happen to be.
Especially since the powers work very different in the chancel because realm, which is useless outside the chancel, in the chancel becomes the most powerful stat.
Yeah.
Because it can do anything. So anything else you want to talk about this system? Or maybe the world?
It's a lot of fun, and it's my favorite role-playing game. And it's even like...
Spoiler. I haven't rated it yet.
Well...
We're getting there.
It's just... I have game mastered a couple different systems, and this is my favorite to game master.
Now, how many... Okay, I have game mastered this... I have game mastered groups of this 3 times myself. How many times have you game mastered Nobilis? How many different campaigns?
I don't.
I can think of at least 2 that you did, that I was in.
I don't remember.
Because I remember you did the one years ago. This was the first one you ever game mastered. The first system you ever game mastered. And then you did one much more recently.
Yes.
I say more recently. It was still a few years ago.
Yes.
But I was in that group, so I recall.
Those are the only 2 times.
So you've done it 2.
Well, I would... It's... Because there's no dice and the stats are very straightforward, it's very easy for someone's first time game mastering. Or even like...
It's very user-friendly.
If you're kind of burned out, if you are an advanced game master or experienced game master and you're kind of just like burned out with always having the stats and the dice rolls in your head, it's like a vacation.
It's okay. So if you are obsessed with very crunchy rule systems and like the dice rolls and like to work out all the probabilities, this might not be the game for you. But if you want something that's much more user friendly and encourages actual role play, because this thoroughly encourages role play. And then on top of it, the universe in this is fantastic. The way there's a war going on between the gods of creation and the gods from outside of creation, which are known as excrucians. And excrucians want to destroy reality, basically. And then the way reality is made, reality is a combination of half a dozen different mythologies, which is really interesting.
And there's like a world tree, and there's different worlds on the tree.
Yes.
And Earth is just one of the worlds.
You can visit other worlds.
You can visit other worlds, or you can just be from one of the other worlds.
You got obsessed with that because I remember in the
I made a whole campaign about
going out on the world tree, which the first time I game mastered it, I didn't do any of that. I never went out on the world tree, and then you did a whole campaign where that's all we did was go to other worlds. So the world in this, the story in this, is fantastic.
There's a lot of information here about the backstory and all everything basically, and you don't have to use everything. You can pick and choose. Like you said, your first campaign, we never left Earth.
No.
I think we had minimal things to do with excrucians in the war.
And actually, no. The first campaign was the one where we had everything was about the excrucians.
Okay.
It was what we didn't do much of was we didn't do. They have a lot of information on here on the Nobilis dueling with rival Nobilis, and we didn't do any of that. We did more of that in your campaign, the first one you did, and then also you did the whole bunch of stuff where we kept going to other worlds. We kept going out on the tree Yggdrasil.
So there's an abundance of information in here that you can either use or not use to whatever extent you want.
Yeah, and this was one of the first games where I felt it was very self-contained.
I also thought of something else, just real quick. I mean, I don't really read a lot of RPG books, so maybe this is just literally the only book I've read, but I like that there was, in the back of the book, there was like a sample campaign. It was like it was an actual, not really a sample game. It was like a couple people, they just transcribed their campaign.
It was done like a script for a play.
Yeah, it was people actually went through that, and they played it, and then I guess they must have recorded it and then transcribed it.
It was one of the playtester games.
It was really helpful to me.
Oh, it helped you realize exactly how the rules work, and it was a fantastic idea.
I don't know if that's unique to this or not.
So now I think they have had that in some other books. I think I've seen that, but it is a really great thing, especially when you're learning a new system. And then also something that I really liked about this book was back when this came out, all the role-playing games out there were doing millions of expansions. And this was one of the first of that time period that I got where I felt like everything you needed was in this one book. There was nothing else you needed. They did a LARPing expansion, but they didn't do really much in the way of expansions, and it didn't need it. Like, you were like, oh no, there's enough in here to do everything. I don't need an expansion. And they didn't try to milk you for every penny with it.
No, they didn't do they could have done very basic rules and then had a world tree expansion, an excrucian expansion.
But they didn't need that.
Yeah.
It was all in here. So now this was the second edition. Now there has been a third edition, which also is now out of stock. We saw the third edition, and when I saw it, I said, "Oh my God! They made a new edition of Nobilis." The author has her new name, Jenna K. Moran, on the cover of the third edition. But the third edition, now I understand they did change some rules for the third edition. But the look of the third edition, the artwork was very different.
It was very disconnected.
Yeah, a lot of the internal artwork looked like not very good anime artwork.
Yeah.
It wasn't even good anime artwork. It was like not very good anime artwork. And then on top of that didn't really fit with the whole theme, because again, this game feels like you're playing in a world co-created by Neil Gaiman and Clive Barker.
It feels very classical, and then there was just like weird,
very modern
anime,
which is very modern.
Yeah,
hyper modern, you might say. So we never got the third edition. So this review is specifically about the second edition, which I understand the rules are different in the third edition. Now, the idea is you're not going to see this for sale on a game shelf. You're going to see this on eBay, which it shows up for a lot of money on eBay. And if you're lucky, you might see it in a used bookstore or at a garage sale. So here's where we're going to rate it, and we're going to talk about in what cases and how much money you should be willing to spend on it. Now, the original release price on this was probably somewhere around, I don't think I don't see it listed there. Maybe it's on the inside cover. I think it was around like $30-40 because it's a nice big hardcover.
It's a big hardcover.
I think, I don't see...
It's usually by the barcode, but I don't see it.
Yeah, I think it was around $30-40 at the time. And that was highly worth it. Highly worth it at the time. So now here's the thing. Role-playing games, it's very difficult for me to give a perfect 10 score to a role-playing game because I always have some issues with it. Mm-hmm. My issues with this are so minor, I'm not even going to address them. This is definitely one of my favorite role-playing game systems of all time. I have game mastered this more than almost any other role-playing game system, except for maybe Rifts. Only because back in the day, we did a lot of Rifts groups, and it was very easy to get people interested in Rifts. But this is like the opposite of Rifts. Rifts is like ridiculous amounts of rules where there don't need like an overabundance. Where
limited amount of prep with this game.
Yeah, this is like no prep necessary, almost none. You make a few characters, which it didn't take you much time at all. And this is a fantastic one. I'm going to give Nobilis 2nd edition 10 out of 10 stars. How about you?
10 out of 10 stars.
So you're right there with me.
Yes.
So this is your number 100% favorite role-playing game of all time.
Yes.
This for me is one of mine, and this is one I'm always willing. If someone wanted to run a game of this, if you were going to run another game of this, I'd definitely be a player in it. I would even consider game mastering it again, even though I've game mastered a couple of long-term campaigns of this. I would do it again. It's a great system. It's really a lot of fun. So here's the thing. If you find this at a garage sale or on a used bookshelf for like $100, and I know I said this was like a $30, $40 book, but if you find this for $100 or less, grab it. Because this is amazing. This is an amazing part of gaming history, and you'll want it in your collection. If it's in decent shape for $100 or less, grab that game. If you are very interested in this game and you see it on eBay and it's even going for a couple of $100, it still might be worth it because especially since they've kind of moved on, and in the 3rd edition they changed the rules a lot. I don't think they're ever going to do a reprint of the way the rules were in 2nd edition.
Yeah.
And it's generally regarded that 2nd edition was the best edition. I looked at the average ratings of 2nd and 3rd edition on Board Game Geek, and 2nd edition is a whole star higher than 3rd edition. So if you really do want to get it and you want to try it out, I would recommend getting it, even for an expensive amount. Like if you didn't have a copy of this, let's say our copy got destroyed, how much would you?
Don't say that.
Yeah, don't. So, but let's say it did happen. I know it's a terrifying thought, but let's say this game got destroyed. How much would you spend on getting a new copy of 2nd edition Nobilis? What would be your upper? Like, let's say this price that you see is the lowest possible price you can find this for. How much would you spend on a copy?
I don't know. I would probably think really hard about it, up to about $500.
$500? I was gonna say $200 for me, but $500?
I would think really hard. I wouldn't like grab it at $500. I would be like,
But would you grab it at $400?
No, I would still think.
3?
I might.
So 3, you would just grab it.
Yeah.
And you'd be like, okay, this is mine. 4 and 5, you would consider it and possibly get it if our copy had been destroyed.
Yes.
Okay, so there you have it. This is a cherished part of our game collection. This is one of both of our favorites role-playing games of all time. And I have to say, the concepts that the author came up with, in my opinion, this is one of those rare just moments of a stroke of genius. Because she came up with a system in this game that was just, it hits on so many levels.
And I think it was something that was needed in the RPG community.
Well, at the time when this came out in 2002, yeah, everything was moving crunchier and crunchier, and it was harder to get new people into role-playing games. The thing was, at the time, when you said role-playing game, most people, even if they were gamers, would be like, role-playing. Because it had moved into that very elite inner circle of super crunchy games where casual gamers did not want anything to do with it. And this was a needed swing in the other direction. I think that was at the time when like all the D20 craze was going on, when there were a million D20 games. But this was it was a much needed injection of creativity. And definitely. So there you have it. So if you see this sitting around on a store shelf for a price you're willing to pay for it, definitely get yourself a copy of Nobilis 2nd edition, as listed on the cover as being by R. Shorn Borgstrom. So if you see the 3rd edition copy with different artwork, it'll say by Jenna K. Moran, same person, but I highly recommend the second edition over the third edition. Actually, third edition is becoming very pricey now because it's been out of print for a while too. So both of them are hard to get your hands on. So there you have it. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns on Nobilis or this video, feel free to put them in the comments section down below. And if you enjoyed this role-playing game review and you'd like to see us talk more about role-playing games on the channel, be sure to give this video a like, share it on any social media, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to the Board Game Kaptain, that's Kaptain spelled with a K, on YouTube. And until next time, game on.